Hi, I'm John Carmack from id Software.
Okay, cool. So, Rage is pretty much there now?
Yep,
Yeah.
we are in final polishing stage. I mean, we've still got a few more weeks to make sure that we get everything right and get kind of the last, I mean, heck, E3 is a good place to get some feedback when we just have hundreds and hundreds of people sitting down on the game. So I'm sure there will be a few tweaks even after what we get today.
Okay. We still haven't seen the PC version, really. I know it's playable at QuakeCon. What this PC games have we got to look forward to?
So, I mean, the PC version, if you've got a high-end graphics card, you wind up running at higher resolution. You can turn on anti-aliasing. One of the significant things that's not really obvious is that because we break everything up into these texture pages, the consoles are limited because they don't have enough memory, and on the PS3 you can't go larger than a 4096 square texture, where there's a lot of scenes that really need more than that on there. So a lot of scenes sort of hit an upper limit on the consoles, where on the PC, where we can use an 8K by 8K texture for that, we can bring in higher fidelity. So even if you're running the PC version at 720p resolution, you'll get crisper graphics on there. And if you crank it all the way up to run at 1080p or higher, then you can put up twice, actually probably closer to 3 times the number of unique pixels that the consoles will give.
As a kind of coder, it seems like the Xbox and PS3 are kind of going to be around for another 2 or 3 years, maybe even 4 or 5 years. But the kind of what's possible on PC is extending outward. Like, is that exciting for you? Do you get?
So, what I look back as probably one of the larger mistakes I made on Rage, and I know I'm probably not the best person to be giving these end of project interviews because I always focus on what I did, what I should have done differently, the opportunities I missed, and all that. When we started on the game, like 6 years ago on there, I looked at the consoles and said, these are as good as the PCs that were on here, and our development strategy was set up such that we basically developed live on all the platforms there. And now when we're looking at PCs that have 10 times the horsepower of the consoles, I'm making a large change in my direction, just saying we should be focusing on building things efficiently on the PC and deploying on the consoles. And we didn't make that as crisp of a distinction as we should have, where like my development system now has 24 threads and 24 gigs of memory, and we can start putting on half a terabyte of solid state drives, and these are the things that are going to drive the development process on the PC. So I'm actually as excited about the changes and how we're developing the titles in this coming generation as like the graphics enhancements and things that I'm going to make.
This might sound a slightly odd question. If you are a punter or buying a PC now, what kind of spec would you recommend?
So one of the things that's changing in the PC world is the integrated graphics parts are almost good enough. We're working pretty closely with Intel to try and get Rage running. We're aiming for 30 frames per second on Sandy Bridge hardware. We're not quite there yet, but from looking at the raw hardware specs, we should be able to get there, and it's only going to get better. But still, right now, you need an aftermarket card. But there's almost no way to go wrong with either NVIDIA or AMD on there. Their best cards are literally an order of magnitude more powerful than the consoles. It is a little bit of a shame that despite the raw horsepower, we are hampered by kind of the arm's length API interface, because it is unhappily true that we have the consoles here running at 60 frames per second, and we can have these massively more powerful PC systems that struggle sometimes to hold the frame rate because of unnecessary overheads, where if we were programming that hardware directly on the metal the same way we do the consoles, it would be significantly more powerful. But there are a lot of moves afoot to be improving that, and we are working closely with all the vendors to kind of address that.
Rage is a bit of a step away from what we know from it.
Well, very intentionally. I mean, everybody would have just said, oh, there's it again if we did another corridor shooter on there. And while we have plenty of corridor shooter maps inside Rage, it's got so much more to it. It has all of the driving and the exploration and the economy and the shopping and the towns and all of these things that come in from other sides of things. And some of them have turned out to be really beneficial to the game. And in fact, I'm very excited about where we'll go after this with Rage 2, where as we identified some of the things in here that okay, it really is a lot of fun to have all these items and put them together and buy things in different places. We can leverage that and start making that much cooler, because it doesn't detract at all from the FPS aspect of it. You've still got those things where this can be an incredible incredibly fun, guns blazing section here, but you can add all of these things to it. When you're taking a break from that, you can kind of kit yourself out with all of this extra stuff and set up for the next time you go in there. And it does play well together. I think that these are really good expansions to the core genre.
For id as a company, put so much effort into tech, but then you seem to spend so much time developing incredible tech, then the games take so long.
That's the biggest thing as we look back on this generation. You know, we had in one form or another, it's 7 years of work that went into it. It's a foregone conclusion that we're never going to throw out that much of the code base ever again. It just, if we have 8 times the resources in a next-gen console, we can't spend a decade writing the optimal technology for that. We need to be into a point where we rewrite sections that matter and that have an impact, and we reuse as much as we can. Because it's true that a lot of things that we do nowadays with some of the AI and animation is really good enough. We can make things look a lot better, but it always has to be trade-offs. And people hate hearing that like, oh, you could have done better, but it comes down to these fundamental things. If you plow 100 people at something for all of these years, and you still didn't do the best game you possibly could. There's every aspect of Rage could be made better if we wanted to spend another 2 years on it, but it's not the optimal use of your resources. I'd be happier if we produced 2 games in that time, and that's actually my sort of personal marching orders for technology development going forward, where I have at least 2 more graphics engine research projects that I want to undertake, but I'm probably more excited for what we can deliver to the end user by the optimizations I want to make to our development process. Because, you know, I mentioned all this stuff about the super powerful PCs on here. I want to optimize our next development process so that we are going to spend money on the PCs and get these incredible supercomputer things here, because I want us to have 2-second level load time so we can iterate on the gameplay cycle, so that designers can try out their ideas and go through them. We have some aspects of Rage that are extremely interactive, like adding the stamps to the world, and it's awesome watching our stamper crew just go in and like take a level and just start adding beauty to it without. And the great part is they can't destabilize the game, they can't hurt anything, the game won't go slower, it won't take more resources, it won't get buggier, it just gets better. And we're trying to find more things like that where we can kind of apply this effort in this interactive way, because there are certainly aspects of the programming cycle and the level design cycle that are not good with Rage. And in fact, if they try to go they want full quality bakes, it can take them an hour to go cycle through a new idea on there. Of course, we have ways that they can iterate faster, but I want to turn this not from arguing about tens of minutes or hours. I want to bring these down to seconds, because the quality that you'll get from being able to iterate and be creative like that is going to be a lot more important. So while I plan on doing more graphics stuff, I hope to do mega geometry in some form or another, but getting it just so that our content creators can create better content faster, I think is more important, because games look fabulous nowadays. I mean, if we can make games that even if they didn't get any better looking, if they look just this good, but we could have twice the creativity going into them in half the time, that would be a worthy goal all by itself. I do think we're going to get better graphics and we're going to pile all this other stuff on there, but the balance has changed for me. You know, I'm even on Rage, you could say that if I wanted to go full-out graphics geek on there would be different approaches that I would have taken, but I made the conscious choice that we can do something that looks arguably best of breed here and still run at 60 frames per second, and saying I forego all of these graphics algorithms in favor of a game that's going to be more responsive. And you can look at that as kind of the turning point where we no longer think that building the prettiest pictures is the best way to deliver value in the games.
Microsoft are talking up Windows 8 gaming again. Same with Windows 7 and Windows Vista has always been a thing. Is there anything you could say to them that you wish they'd do to help PC gaming?
I mean, PC gaming is still profitable. We do expect it to be a minority share of the total sales of the games, but it's still a viable market, viable communities there. You get the coolest hardware on the PCs. You get to do, play with the real high horsepower stuff there. But in terms of what Microsoft has done, some good things like X Audio 2. They brought over, and the X Input stuff, the development work that they finally figured out works is really the best interfaces to those things of any platform on there. It got it developed on the Xbox, pulled back to Windows. That's great. You know, their work for the XNA stuff, they've done a lot of good things. I don't think Microsoft is horribly botching a lot of things. I think there are large-scale market demographics that say, well, PCs are where you make lots of money with MMOs, but consoles are more the domain of the action games on there. And I think that there is some natural segmentation. I don't think it's a blunder in any way on Microsoft's part.
The only thing I think I'd like to change about PC gaming at the moment is having a conference, T3. It makes me sad that we don't get to see PC games running on big cinema screens and everything. Do you ever feel that?
No, there's probably something to be said about the that probably ties into the question about graphical focus on things, because there's no doubt we have an order of magnitude more power on the PCs, and there's several developers that if you said go for it on here, we would make vastly better looking stuff if we really made that our focus. But we can't, the timetables are so long. To do best of breed on here takes years to develop an engine and then to develop the content to go with it. And you just run yourself right out of business doing things that way. And those just wind up being kind of the cold, hard economic truths that you could spend $100 million building a game now. And if you did that focused on the PC, you'd be out of business.
If you're a customer kind of going into Rage now, what's the kind of, what do you think is the most fun you'll have in it? Where's the stuff that you're most proud of?
Now, personally, I am most proud that I won the battle on 60 frames per second on there, because that was a hard-fought argument internally. Right. Because it's tough, even with the best technology on here, trying to do something that looks cutting edge graphically and do it all in 15 milliseconds at a stretch there. There were so many cases where it was just like, oh, it'd be easier if we go to 30 hertz, or we can throw more guys on there. There's valid, good gameplay things that you're just not going to do at this fidelity at 60 hertz, and those were hard compromises. But I think the feel of the game does pay off. And while there's a bunch of people that really can't tell the difference, you sit them down, it's like, oh, it looks the same to me. But people that care about gaming, that care about the feel of it, you can tell. It's the responsiveness and the smoothness and the way it plays there. And that's the thing that, that I had the personal stake in there. The thing that people will notice is just the scope of the world on there. We are out of our dark corridors. We specifically said, okay, we're going to have some bright desert wastelands here, so it's not another thing like Doom 3 where everybody's squinting and wishing they could see more in there. And then you get into some of the levels that we have some maps that were just kind of built by an artist that they spent like a year on, and they look fabulous. The level of detail that's in there, you just go and look in every corner, and there's some sense of personality and what the people have poured their souls into there. And it's a fabulous canvas to have this gameplay on. And we've got the run and gun and weapon switching and all this stuff that we've always been good at. But there's lots of little gameplay touches in there. I mean, people just seem to love our cripple mechanics in there, where guys fall over limping, getting their last shots off at you, and just fun little AI touches. And some of the weapons have really good feel to them. Whipping the wing sticks offhand while you're shooting at other people. I think that we delivered what we set out to do on there, where we've got the new elements in there with the driving and the racing and collecting and economy and stores and towns, all this stuff. As well as all the things that we've always been good at. And many of these things I'm really looking forward to taking further steps with, because I think a lot of them have proven out to have real value for us.
You said, or there was, you gave kind of an interview where you talked about the importance of input lag, and that's something you kind of really hammered home. Like, do you think it's solved? Do you think it's something that the industry has to take on?
So there's a number of things that contribute to input lag on here, and the way we test these things is we take one of the high-speed consumer cameras. You can record at 1200 frames per second. It's awesome that that's consumer technology now. We use it at our rocketry shop all the time too. So you record this really high-frequency stuff, and like I would do it on iOS devices and Xbox games. So you have the camera so it can see your input and see the screen if it's not right there, and you go tap. and you count frames to see how long it takes for either the view to change or the weapon to fire or something like that. And it's, it can be much longer than people expect on there, where I think it's interesting where a lot of people decry things like OnLive with cloud gaming on there, saying, well, that has to suck because you're guaranteed to have 50 milliseconds of latency or something. But a lot of people don't realize that most of the 360 and PS3 games that they're playing now have over 50 milliseconds of latency involved. Many of them have over 100 milliseconds. And if you're playing on a bad television set that does processing and you haven't turned it into game mode, you might add over 100 milliseconds additional latency there. So these are things that can be measured. And certainly adding 50 milliseconds makes a game worse, no doubt about it. And in fact, it's more than that when you don't pipeline all the compression. So adding more latency is never good, but there are certainly levels where a lot of games, people don't care if it's at 100 milliseconds on there. First-person shooters, it does matter. Like our motion for aiming on there is very, very tight on ours, but even there, we have a pipeline between game frame, rendering frame, GPU rendering. Now the GPU overlaps the rendering frame, but it is fixed one frame behind the game frame. And then some things like animating on firing weapons, that has an additional job deferred animation set up on there. So even when we care a whole lot about it, we wind up with a number of frames of latency added in there. So we try to make sure that the button press gets in at the very latest possible time, forwarded as far forward as possible. But it's something that the higher the frame rate you're at, the better it is. It's always better to be 3 frames behind at 60 hertz than at 30 hertz. But there actually are a lot of shipping games that that are at 30 hertz and have multiple frames of lag on there. Some of them are just bad programming choices, like pulling the input in the wrong place or queuing it up when you don't need to. But some of it's unavoidable if you're doing this much parallelism that you need to do all of your animation on there. You need to have that scheduled out. So it's a challenge, but throwing frame rate at it makes all of them better. But I did do a number of tests as we were evaluating all this, like, well, 60 is better than 30. How much better is 120 hertz than 60? And the answer is not much. It's very difficult to tell, even under ideal lab conditions, when you're saying, okay, here's a joypad. This is going to run raster at 120 hertz. This is at 60. Almost nobody can tell the difference between that, while almost everybody can tell the difference between 30 and 60. So it's interesting there that we are accomplishing sort of the limits of what humans can care about as a biological system there. There's a few more steps that we need to go on areas like anti-aliasing and resolution, where you can start saying individual discernible pixels when you get to like iPhone 4 resolution on there. It doesn't count all the edge cases, but still on a number of these things we're converging at the limits of our biological systems, where you can just sort of say eventually, well, we're done here. We can move on to the next problem. But latency's not quite done yet, but it's going to be done within the next generation, even for more mediocre titles.
And you said something really sweet just a second ago about that you make technology and it's a kind of really hard engineering problem, but then you ship it to artists and they pour their heart and soul into it. And nobody really talks about that bit of it. Like everyone talks about the tech of it.
I actually think that the tech gets more focused than it should. But I mean, if people are excited about it, I'll talk about it all day long on there. I'm an engineer. That's what I do. And people ask me a lot what I feel about whether games are art forms, and I'm not doing art. I'm doing engineering. I'm given a set of resources and a set of goals, and I'm trying to chart the best way to use those resources to get us to some approximation of those goals. But but the artists really do have their vision about what they want to get in there. And the interesting thing is it's so far beyond my vision, and I think that's what differentiates the artists from the rest of us on here, where when I'm building id Tech 5, I'm thinking, okay, tiling textures are repetitive and bad. We want to be able to unique everything here. And I'm imagining this world without these certain artifacts. While when it goes over to the artists and they just build this just breathtakingly awesome looking area, I think to myself, oh, I didn't have that in mind when I built this. This is so far beyond what I was thinking. But that's happened, repeatedly over the years now. And I pretty much expect that now, where I'm like, okay, now the artists are going to deliver something that just blows me away. I mean, they say that they schedule the moment where John does some magic and the game gets much better, but I wait for the artist to deliver on that. And I do think that, for many years, I was doing things that were showing people things that they'd never seen before. It was opening up new worlds, but at this point, even you don't have to be a wizard to deliver just about any vision that a creative person has. I mean, they don't have carte blanche. They can't do everything. They can't say, okay, I want my 1,000 orcs traipsing down across all of this stuff on here. But if a designer has a vision, the hardware is powerful enough now that we can do a pretty good job at just about everything. We had to pick our battles very carefully in past generations. You did not try to do an outdoor world in Quake 1 because it would have sucked. But now you can pick any genre, any scenario, and you can do at least a halfway decent job of cutting that out. And in many ways, I take that as saying we're a large part of the way to mission accomplished on being able to do that. There's a huge gap between the pixel fidelity of offline movie rendering and what we do in games, and I care about all those things. I care about going ahead and getting our gamma-corrected anti-aliasing with indirect Fresnel specular reflections and all this stuff. But when I step back and look at it, it's not that important. And I want to make sure that the engineering resources that we're bringing to bear, as we look at kind of our core technology team, the heavy lifters there, I don't want us going off and doing some navel-gazing graphics thing that's not going to make that much difference. We are in the entertainment business. We're in the business of producing experiences for people that they love so much they're willing to pay for them, and we need to keep our priorities in mind. Graphics is a large part of it. In fact, I'm pleasantly surprised that we still get as much kind of interest and buzz about graphics technology now as we do, because honestly, I think the gameplay is, the difference between a high-end and a low-end graphics game, I think can be overshadowed by really awesome gameplay. But I've got my skill set and I contribute where I can on there. But I think that the designers, more and more the interviews should be with the designers and not the engineers.
Well, it's lovely to speak to you, John. That was absolutely great. Thank you so much. I hope you have a really good show.